Hi, my name's Lance Stuchell. I'm the Director of Preservation Services for Digital Collections at the University of Michigan Library. And I'm really excited to talk to you today about creating a shared digital preservation vision at our library. So I'm going to give a little background, then I'm going to talk about building our digital preservation baseline, and then going and assessing where we are compared to the baseline. I'm going to talk about some takeaways that I hope is useful for you all. And then I'm really going to, in this presentation, talk about the model more than I'm going to be talking about like the results of our assessment or anything like that, just because I think that will be more applicable to a wider range of people. But please feel free to ask me any questions you have on either aspect of this work in the Q&A or directly. So around 2017, 2018, many of us were realizing that we needed to reset our digital preservation program. And we were very experienced in digital preservation as applied to digitization of flat things, right? We could do books, we could do images, we could preserve the outputs of that process, we could provide access to that, and that was working really well. But around that time, there were several things that started to happen that made us realize we really needed to step back and maybe adapt our approach. One of those things was some basic preservation functions, even things like fixity, were not being consistently applied across our digital collections. Another thing that we were realizing was new content was posing new challenges. The scale of digitized audio and particularly moving image was really hard to fit into our approach to digitization of flat things. The scale of that was just proving to be too large. And we lacked appropriate approaches and workflows for born digital material that we were just and continue to get more and more of. We also started to very seriously do web archiving at that time. And those of you that are doing web archiving know that it's really a completely different form of content than we were used to. And we didn't know how comfortable we should be really turning over almost all aspects of that to vendors like the Internet Archive. And we needed a framework to have a discussion about how we should be approaching web archiving. Like many of you, we were also finding that staffing was a limiting factor to advancing our work. We knew we had these problems, but we also knew we lacked staff to address many of them. So our first step was to talk about what we should be doing. What should our program be doing? And the first step in that was creating a digital preservation steering committee. That it is made up, it's still a standing committee that still exists. And it's made up of content stewards, it's made up of folks from library IT, it's made up of preservation staff. And we really wanted to have this conversation kind of across these silos on how we should be approaching these challenges. Our approach was greatly informed by our past institutional work and the local knowledge that we already had. Community work like OIIS track and really especially the NDSA levels. And we talked to our peers and asked how they were approaching some of this. What was particularly useful was to learn how our peer institutions were addressing the NDSA levels. That was very inspiring for us and inspired us to create a digital preservation baseline document. So essentially, the baseline is a shared definition of what we as an organization believe we should be doing when we're saying, hey, we're going to preserve that thing. It's made up of 3 values and 12 activities that we believe have to occur so we can say preservation is happening. It kind of stops us from addressing content type as they come and having different approaches for these. It brings digitized and born digital to the same standard. So in 2021, we published the first version of our baseline for preservation, and then we updated that in a version 2 in 2024. So now that we knew kind of where we needed to be and where we wanted to be, we had to look at, well, where are we? What are we doing now? And that was a series of assessments. So in 2021, kind of going into 2022, we did a needs assessment. And that was looking at one section of the baseline, which was financial and staffing commitments. And while we made several recommendations in that report, the big thing we were doing was recommending staffing needs that could support preservation activities. In 2023, we did two other assessments. We did a systems assessment and a digital preservation case studies. The systems assessment was a big project. It took about a year, and it was examining every other aspect of the baseline outside of the financial and staffing commitments and applied those to each of our 5 repositories. And what resulted was we documented about 57 gaps between where we say we want to be and where we are now. And that's, adding up all of the gaps in each of our 5 repositories and some of our like broader policies and things like that. The case studies, we went at it from a different way, where instead of starting at our repositories and our technical infrastructure, we went and started at collections that were deemed at risk. So this included web archiving, it included digital scholarship, and it included content that we have in our collections that's on media that's going obsolete. And both of these assessments gave us recommendations to improve our systems and getting our systems and approaches more in line with what we say in the baseline. These assessments also really informed the 2024 update of the baseline. So we're using the baseline as the rubric for our assessments, and the assessments really tested where the baseline was useful for that and where maybe it needed a little bit of work. So in 2024, the update was to really focus the baseline on being used as a rubric for our assessments. We are currently working on a 2025 assessment report card, we're calling it, because we don't want to make a huge documents like we did before. And it's really just, we have these gaps that we've identified. Where are we now? Where are we closing the gaps and what gaps remain? This is also an effort to kind of unify all of these previous assessment projects into one. So let's talk about what's working. Let's talk about the good, fun stuff first. An unplanned positive outcome of this work has been the Digital Preservation Steering Committee has really been able to hardwire expertise from across our institution. Before we had that, and before we started this work, we weren't talking. We weren't talking enough. We weren't talking about the right things. So having our selectors, our people that are bringing in the content, our LIT and preservation staff working together has been so vital. We can share our goals. We can share each other's challenges, so we understand what challenges are bringing things in, what challenges are in preserving that material and making it accessible. And we can also advocate together. And I'm going to kind of talk more about the advocacy aspect of this in the rest of my talk. There's been, the whole point of it, there's actually been improvements, right? So existing systems are being improved. So that number of 57 is going to be smaller in our report card. It still will be a number, but it's going to be smaller than that because things are being addressed and we're kind of chewing through the work of improve our systems and bring ourselves in alignment with the baseline. Born digital and web archiving aren't being treated different from digitization now. It's all under the baseline, and each is expected to meet what we're saying in the baseline. And both Born Digital and web archiving are receiving more resources, as is our digitization of moving image. And our LIT staff is working on a new repository, and that is being guided by the baseline. So these are all like really positive things that we're very proud of. And also probably the biggest accomplishment is we've actually been able to hire staff through our recommendations. So since 2021, all of the core position recommendations in our reports have been filled, which is something we're ecstatic about. As an example, the digital preservation unit has went from 2 people to 4 people. So we've been able to double our capacity, which is amazing. And the reason we were able to do that was because, like I've said, the shared advocacy right? It's not just me saying like, we really need help. It's people joining with me, and it's people joining in positions in other areas of the library saying like, hey, we need this to improve our preservation program. So what is challenging? So, I mean, I know you're all thinking like, that sounds like a lot of work. And it was, and it is, and it remains to be, and it will remain being a lot of work. And our staff time is the most critical and costly investment to this. Even though this work is shared, it is the digital preservation unit that drives most of this work. A staff member on our team really like devotes a ton of time to the assessments and kind of driving the assessments and organizing meetings and organizing the updates. And it's time consuming as work. There's also shared versus local priorities. So this is ongoing, right? We want to do an assessment every 2 years, and we want to do a baseline update every 2 years. So we're kind of constantly being like, hey, can we talk to you about an update? Or hey, can you look at a new version of the baseline? And this work needs to happen across the institution, but different divisions have different priorities that come up. And sometimes people don't have time, even though they want to have the time. And that can be a problem that we need to be patient and kind of work through when people have time to work with us on things. Also, the way you get around this is good communication, and good communication is also work and time. So I hope some things that you can take away from this is the first thing I want to say is like, don't let what I just said about how much time it takes scare you completely away. I think some of this can be very applicable to smaller or larger organizations. We do have a 4-person team, and it is complicated to get this work done. We also have, some may even say, an overly complicated organization, but we're definitely complicated. And we have, like I said, 5 digital repositories. So smaller institutions may not have as much staff as we do to have these conversations. We also might not have the complexity to do this. And so please don't be too frightened by the time, because I think there are aspects of this that can still be applicable to everyone. And shared work equals shared advocating, like I've already said. Even informal information and knowledge sharing can be huge. A selector understanding the challenges on the preservation side puts them on your team, it puts them on your side. And that relationship has been so valuable for us. And it's just been a huge improvement over where we were before we started this work, because these team efforts and staffing and getting more resources have been very successful. And maybe the biggest outcome of this, particularly with creating the baseline, which is like online and everyone in the world can read it, is it's documenting the work and the costs of our preservation commitments. We work in institutions that are really good at saying like, we're going to preserve that. We're going to preserve that. Give us your collections. We'll preserve it. And maybe the people making those promises don't understand how much it costs to do that. So we have the baseline now, which can surface like when we say we're preserving something, we need to do all of these things. And it's helping us have these conversations before that commitment's made to make sure that we have the resources and that we have the knowledge. It's not perfect, we're still getting there, but it's really helped that. And I would really encourage you all to do something similar write this down about what it costs you, how much work it is to preserve our stuff and to surface our work more. Thank you so much. This has been great. I'm really looking forward to fielding your questions in a few minutes / couple weeks, which is weird. And my email's there. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any direct questions. Thank you so much.